Hi, I'm Chef Keith Snow. Today I'm going to show you how to make one of my all-time favorite dishes, beef bourguignon. The first thing you need to know when you make this dish is, what kind of beef. And in this case here, you can look at my fine specimen. This is rump roast. And with the name, you can kind of get the idea that it comes from the back of the animal. This piece of meat is a muscle, obviously. It does a lot of work, so it's got a lot of connective tissue, and those are those little white specks that you see in there. And it's very important to buy a piece of meat for this dish that has a good high fat content, lots of marbling. When you're looking for meat for this dish, you want something that has that connective tissue because it's a slow-cooked braised dish. You don't want like a beef tenderloin which has very little fat because it's going to cook up too fast, it would get dry on you. So look for something with connective tissue. Now another note about this dish, it's a very prized kind of ancient dish in France, and the beef over there is called Charolais beef, and that's a breed of cattle. You don't see it very often in the States. They are here, and it's kind of a grayish white looking cattle. And what's fabulous about it, in France particularly, that it's grass-fed. They don't use the same system of beef production that we use in the States. Very available nowadays. I mean, if you go on harvesteating.com and look for grass-fed beef, there'll be articles on it. In your favorite, organic market like Whole Foods and Earth Fare, stores like that are now carrying grass-fed beef because it's actually healthier for you. When the animal grazes on grass like it was meant to do, it produces better beef. Now to start this recipe, there's several steps. It's a little involved, but it's very worth it. And the first thing we need to do is take this beef and cut it up. So we're just going to put it on our board here. I'll set this aside. Now all beef has grain in it, and we don't want to cut with the grain because that can make chewy meat. And the other thing, this dish you want larger chunks of beef. This is about the right size, almost sort of like the shape of your palm. You don't want little teeny chunks. So just randomly cut it up, and I'm cutting a lot of these what they call on the bias. That adds surface area. See, this is a nice size chunk, and just cut it up into chunks. So now we'll roll this beef. And you can see it's got some good fat on there, and that's just what you want. If you get meat that's too lean, the dish will not be what you want. All right, so now we have it chunked up like that. We're just going to drop it over here into this container. And this meat is going to need to marinate overnight. And I'll warn you and stress to you that you want to do it overnight. If you try to do it for an hour, you're not going to have beef bourguignon because it needs to sit overnight. I'll show you how we make the marination liquid right now. The ingredients are fresh thyme, and this I just picked right in my own garden. And here we have garlic cloves, 5 garlic cloves. So we're going to have to go over to the stove to make this infusion to start marinating. So we'll go right over here. Very important part of this dish is making this infusion that's going to help marinate the beef. Now you could take this bunch of herbs and this garlic, we're going to marinate the beef in wine. You could put it all in there and put it in the refrigerator, but you're not going to get the same effect as if you warm these up and extract the garlic flavor and extract the flavor of the thyme. So that's what we're going to do here. So what we're going to do is this is bacon fat, and I always keep some of this around. It's a very stable fat, and it's classically used in this dish. It goes very well. Don't be afraid of bacon fat. We're not using a lot, and it's going to give an amazing flavor. So take, I would say, about a tablespoon total. We're going to put that in there. We're going to take our garlic and just dump it right in, and take these thyme stems, just kind of give them a little, break up like that. It's going to help release the oil. Put them down in there, and take a spoon and just move it around. You can hear it sizzling away. That's what you want. And this step is critical. And I've made it both ways, I know. If you don't do this, you're going to have half the flavor that you would by doing this. And it doesn't take very long. So that's ready. Now what we want to do is turn off the heat. And another important thing is this beef needs to marinate. We don't want to cook it. So I don't want to put these ingredients on top of the beef because they're hot. So what I'm going to do is take my wine, and very important, this is a French wine and it's a Pinot Noir. And in Burgundy, the red wine in the Burgundy region is all Pinot Noir. And if it's white, it's Chardonnay. But for this dish, we're using a red wine. It's a Pinot Noir. And please do not use like a gallon jug of wine. You won't get good results. And spend a little money here. If you didn't want to drink this, if you weren't willing to drink it, if it wasn't good enough or high enough quality, you certainly don't want to cook with it. So look for a nice Pinot Noir. We're going to pour some in. So now we've cooled down this mixture and it can go on the beef. So we're going to go and put it right on top of our beef. All right, now we've made our little infusion here. And the next step to do this is, here's our beef. It's sitting in our vessel that we're going to marinate in. We can also cook in this later on. That's another handy thing. And I can't tell you how much wine you're going to need because that's depending upon how much meat you have. I mean, are you going to get 1 pound? Are you going to get 2 pounds? What size your pot is? So you have to follow along with me. We want the meat to be somewhat submerged with the wine, so you'll have to make some adjustments. So what we'll do is take our mixture that we made and we're going to dump it right on top of the beef. Okay, we'll set this aside, and now I'll show you, and I'm going to tip this up so my cameraman can see. There is not enough liquid in there now. So I'm going to add, right from our bottle of wine, just to get it somewhat submerged. And the great thing about this dish is we're going to use this wine. We're not going to just pour off the marinating liquid. It's going to cook with the beef and give it just an unbelievable flavor. So once you have it sort of like that, where the meat is 3/4, 80% submerged, you're good to go. And we have our garlic and our thyme in there. We're going to put a cover on this, like that, and then we're going to refrigerate that overnight. Now let's talk about some of the other ingredients in here. Pearl onions. This is something I don't use often, but it's very classic to this dish. You have to have pearl onions. And what we're going to do with these is just dump them right in the pot when we're cooking. And that's going to be important because they're going to simmer in there and they're going to give a lot of flavor to the final dish. Now the mushrooms we're using, these actually are what they call baby bellas. These are very small portobello mushrooms. In France, classically, you would use white button mushrooms, which are everywhere. Today at my market, I didn't like the look of the white button mushrooms, so I've made a substitution to these baby bellas, which will be just perfect. So now that we have all of our ingredients, our meat is marinating, we're going to go over to the stove. We've got one that we've soaked overnight. We're going to show you how to cook it. What I love about this dish is that it's made in one pot, and the pot that you use is very important. This actually happens to be a French pot, which is pretty cool, but it's a heavy enameled cast iron pot, and that's what you want. The other thing that's important whenever you're doing something that's braising is that you have a tight fitting lid. Because if it's not tight fitting and you're having a lot of evaporation, you can have problems. So make sure that you've got a tight fitting lid and a good heavy Dutch oven. Now, this is some meat that we have left to marinate overnight. You can see some of the fat has kind of, because of the cold temperature, gotten a little clumpy, but that's perfectly fine. Now what you do here is just dump this right in. We want to get everything off of there. Now we can set that aside. We're actually going to turn on our heat to about a medium-low. And now we're going to add the rest of our ingredients. Now these pearl onions is 1 cup of pearl onions. So just take them and distribute them with any juices. These were previously frozen, which is fine. Put those in there. And then we have 2 cups of these mushrooms. And we're just going to dump these in. Now at this point, we've got our ingredients in there. We have to add beef stock. And my beef stock is right here. And again, the technique we're using is very easy. I mean, essentially it's like crock pot cooking. The classic term would be braising. And in a braise, you want to have the stuff that's in the pot, in this case our meat and our vegetables, to be about 3/4 of the way submerged. So we will take some beef stock. I would estimate that we're going to use 2 cups. So we'll go ahead and pour this right in. Maybe 1 more. And now we're going to season it with salt and pepper that we have right here. And at this point it's had no salt and pepper, so I would add quite a bit. Take some kosher salt. This is about a tablespoon. Now, one thing to note, sometimes with beef bourguignon or any stew dish or braised dish, the recipe will call for dusting the meat in flour and searing it before you do this. You could do that, but I find in this application you don't need to. You're going to get a perfect stew without doing that. So for the sake of ease and time, I wouldn't bother. So at this point, we're just going to put this on, and I'll see you in 3 hours. All right, the beef bourguignon is done. It's been on the stove about 3.5 hours. It should be very tender. We need to take off the lid. And what we want to do, there's liquid in here that's cooked way down. It's reduced. We want to thicken it up a little bit. We're going to use a technique called a slurry. And a slurry is just a little cornstarch, equal amounts with cold water. Have to use cold water, otherwise you'll get lumps. So we're going to take some of this and distribute it inside this pot. And because the liquid in here is just off the boil, it should thicken up, or what we would call in the restaurant industry, tighten up. So we want this to tighten up. We don't want it overly thick, but it needs to thicken up a little bit. And the wine smell coming out of here with the thyme and the garlic, you have to make this dish. And I would actually make it maybe for a special occasion, and you'd really be in good shape. One other thing I'd mention with this is classically sometimes you'll see it served with what the French call lardons. And lardons are little pieces of bacon that are cooked, and they would finish it with pieces of bacon. We're not going to do that today. I think we have plenty the way it is, and it's at the perfect thickness. So now we're going to serve it up, and before we do that, fresh parsley is classic, and this is the flat leaf Italian parsley, so we're just going to run our knife through this stuff like such. We just want it to be kind of fine. And you can see on the plate we already have some beautiful buttermilk mashed potatoes that have some chives in it. Great with beef bourguignon. All right, so now to plate it up, we're going to take these amazingly tender pieces of beef. And the smell of the wine in here, I mean, this wine has been in here for 24 hours and then we cooked it. It's just stunning how good the flavors are. Very rustic, beautiful French country cooking. In Burgundy, you have this with a nice bottle of wine. In the winter time, you're really doing well. So now we'll take some of our little button mushrooms, our baby portobellos, with some of those onions. We'll put it in there, and then we'll search for just a little bit of our gravy. And now we finish it up with a little bit of fresh parsley. We'll put a little more parsley on the top. I would serve this definitely with a wine from the region, and Burgundy, you'll be looking at Pinot Noir. This would go beautifully on a nice cool fall afternoon. You can't beat it. That is a very classy dish. I hope you try it today, and thanks a lot for joining me.
To see more tips, techniques, and videos, visit harvesteating.com. 4 seasons, 1 lifestyle.